You're listening to Bad Dog Agility, bringing you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. And now, here are your hosts, Sarah and Esteban.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 171. Today's podcast is brought to you by Elite Science. Unlock your dog's full potential with a unique competitive edge solution, 1TDC. 1-tetradecanol complex is a patented blend of unique fatty acid oils designed to safely and effectively keep joints and muscles at their best to maximize performance and shorten recovery time. 1TDC is the next generation of fatty acids and is used by many current and past national agility champions and world team members. All of our listeners will automatically qualify for a great 1TDC special offer by purchasing online at BDA1TDC.com. That's BDA, the number 1, TDC.com.
Today's podcast is also brought to you by Back on Track. Dog agility is a demanding sport and can be difficult on the body, both the dogs and the humans. Back on Track specializes in dog blankets, beds, and wraps that keep muscles warm and reduce the pain in joints. If you've got a nagging knee, calf, or ankle injury, Back on Track's human products can help get you back in the ring. Visit Back on Track at backontrackproducts.com.
Today, we want to talk a little bit about handler focus versus obstacle focus and what that means for your agility training.
It's the age-old question. You hear people talking about it all the time. Your instructor may tell you, hey, your dog is handler focused, or your dog is too obstacle focused, and we need to make them more handler focused. So what does this really mean?
Well, I think when we think about a dog that's handler focused, it's a dog that may occasionally bypass a jump. They're looking at the handler instead of looking straight ahead. They're constantly head checking the handler to see what the handler's doing. Those are all things that dogs that are very handler focused tend to do. When we think about a dog that is obstacle focused, we think about a dog that is always driving forward, driving the line, maybe even when the handler doesn't want them to. The handler turns and the dog keeps going. The dog has more focus on the obstacles and they're not paying attention to the handler.
Now, these are very black and white definitions, and if there's anything that I don't like in dog training, it's black and white, because there's so much gray in there. And I prefer to think of this, this dichotomy between handler and obstacle focus in terms of a spectrum. Okay. Most dogs are going to be a little bit of one and a little bit of the other. So maybe a more accurate way of saying it is 70% of the time that my dog runs around on the course, they're obstacle focused. The other 30%, they're handler focused, right? And obviously there are going to be differences between dogs. I think it's pretty impossible to have a dog that's 100% obstacle focused, right? That dog by definition would literally be doing its own thing, whatever it wanted to, completely blowing off the handler. And someone that's very, very handler focused would probably have a very difficult time even doing a single obstacle or two obstacles in a row. And while I think dogs in those extreme categories, they're almost universally going to be beginners in their very, very first lesson. Okay. Because agility is a sport where dogs have to confidently, quickly, and smoothly switch from handler to obstacle focus and back again. Okay. They need to check in with their peripheral vision. Some dogs may head check. And remember, a head check is not necessarily a bad thing. A head check is only a bad thing when it slows your dog down.
Or causes a mistake.
That's right. Causes the bar to come down. Causes them to miss a weave pole entry. Adds an additional stride, which slows them down. So otherwise, a head check is really no big deal. And so I think that's a key thing to remember for those of you who are trying to ruthlessly eliminate head checking from your own agility. There's different head checks. So if we think about it in terms of a spectrum and we understand and realize that dogs are going to be switching from one to the other, now you have something that's useful. You have a concept that can really help you. It's not a black and white thing. So especially you beginners out there, you may find that you are quickly going to become labeled. And a lot of that is going to be internalized, meaning you are going to begin to identify with that, right? And associate your dog with whichever end of the black and white dichotomy you're on, right? So if you have a dog that's more handler focused, they go off course. You find that when you call them, they're not quite as responsive. You could very well not have an obstacle focused dog. You could just be late with your cues, right? And so you have a lot of people whose dogs go off course and they think, well, my instructor says my dog is really obstacle focused. And I look at their run and I say, oh, your cues need to come a little sooner. In the absence of that information, your dog is just doing the last cue you told them to, which was to go straight or to turn slightly to the right and take whatever's in front of them. So it's very reasonable for that dog to go and do that. And so sure, they may be a little more obstacle focused than handler focused, but the dominant issue here that needs fixing is your cues need to come out a little more quickly. And so then it becomes not a useful construct, not a useful concept for you to hear or think of your dog as obstacle focused, because you're going to say, okay, you know what? That's the dog's problem. I've got this dog. They're really obstacle focused. Like, how do I change them? How do I make them different? It turns out what you needed to do was to change you and your handling. And it really didn't have much to do with that. And so I think this was a very important idea that I wanted to talk about on this podcast.
And I want to repeat something that you said earlier because it is so very important. And that is, neither one of these things is bad. You must have both. You must have a dog that can focus on obstacles and can focus on you. And as you said, can switch back and forth. And I think that's where the problem usually comes in, especially with inexperienced dogs. It's the switching that's so difficult. It takes a little bit longer. Once they put their focus on you, it takes them a little longer to reorient to the course. And that's something that comes with practice. That context switching is something that's very mentally demanding, and it requires a level of experience and kind of internalizing, both for the handler and the dog, the ability to have some of the stuff become subconscious, right? So that you can make that switch faster when everything that you do takes so much conscious effort as it does when you're new to something, then everything that you do is a little bit slower, and then all of your timing is a little bit slower. So you have to make some of that subconscious.
I like that concept of context switching.
Yes.
Or that phrase that you were using there. We just finished the European Open this past weekend, the FCI Agility European Open, that took place in Italy. Big event, hundreds of the best dogs around the world from all different countries. And I love the European Open for a lot of different reasons. It's one of the premier events because of its size, because of its representation, people from all over the world, but also it takes mixed breeds, which the Agility World Championship does not. And the teams are much larger per country, meaning that some of the fringe dogs who, for whatever reason, weren't able to make the Agility World Championship team for their country that year are able to attend the European Open. So you just have a much deeper pool of dogs, right? There's more depth. So it's, in many ways, a more difficult competition to win. The courses, I think, in general, over the years, at least the last 5 years, except for maybe 1 year, are more difficult at the European Open as well. But your phrase made me think of the course design, because these are courses where the dog has to absolutely run all out, have intense obstacle focus and commitment, and yet be exquisitely sensitive to the verbal cues and body motion and position of their handlers in order to navigate these courses. And they have to do it at full speed, because if you're not doing it at full speed, guess what? You're not going to win.
That's right.
You're not going to medal. And so we know that dogs of all breeds are capable of doing this. Handlers of all shapes, sizes, speeds, and ages are able to do this because we just watched it happen. And so I think that's a really great example and point of emphasis. Not only that, the medium height dog winner was Sylvia Turkman. I believe this is her 5th European Open final win. 4 of them have been in the medium height class, and this is with her Pyrenean Shepherd Lay. That's their 2nd EO final win. And Sylvia mentions, this comes from her
Extreme Foundations DVD.
And actually, I will link to both Sylvia's winning run, which you guys will love. It's making the rounds on social media right now. And we'll link to her page or information page about the DVD. But in this Extreme Foundations DVD, she talks about some of the advanced handling concepts, useful skills that you need at this kind of level. And something that she talks about is obstacle versus handler focus. And she was of the opinion that when dogs start out, they're kind of like naturally a little bit handler focused.
Makes total sense. They don't,
right.
They have the obstacles have no meaning, right? Whereas the person has meaning in their life.
Yeah. And they've got all the food on them.
Right.
Right. So they're going to be checking you out. And then as they learn the game, they become more and more obstacle focused. And she made the case that there's a certain maneuver, the maneuver being basically a bypass cue, where you don't want the dog to take an obstacle. You want your dog to come with you, right? So people in just about every handling system have a variation of this maneuver, whether they call it a call to side or a heel cue or a come to me or a stay with me, some version of that. Don't take an obstacle. Just kind of start tracking toward me. Okay. And that's really a clear call for what? Stopping your obstacle focus and orienting on the handler briefly. And she had mentioned that she didn't like to teach it too soon because she wants the dog to have some obstacle focus before you start teaching them this handler focus based cue/maneuver. So I found that was very interesting. And that's just another way of showing that a better way of thinking about obstacle focus versus handler focus is exactly as we've been saying here, that your dog is basically shifting from moment to moment from one to the other or using them in combination. There's also one more thing that I'd like to point out, and I think it's that whether you're obstacle focus or handler focus can be somewhat dependent on the obstacle that we're talking about. So how many of you have ever worked really, really hard on your weave pole entries for like a week or two? And then you go to a trial and the dog suddenly veers away off course and takes the weave poles when they weren't supposed to, because there's a lot of reinforcement there. I think there you have an obstacle focused dog and your training directly contributed to that, where even though your body language and maybe your verbal cue were somewhere else, they were headed for the weave poles. So
I think another big one, obviously, is tunnels. People talk about the tunnel suck dog. They see a tunnel and they're in it, and there's nothing the handler can do about it, right? It's, you can be at a full decel stop position and the dog is still going to go into that tunnel because it's a tunnel and they love it. So you can definitely have too much obstacle focus for a specific obstacle. And I think when we talk about, people will say too much obstacle focus or too much handler focus. And so what we're really saying is we just need to even it out a little bit. We don't want to eliminate it because we need it. We need our dog to drive to that tunnel when we're supporting it, right? We need the dog to pull off of it when we're calling them, to something else. So we need both. And it's a matter of balance, right? If your dog is taking the obstacle no matter what you do, then that balance is off. If you can't get the dog to go into the tunnel unless you run right up to the mouth of the tunnel, that balance is off. They're not obstacle focused enough. So when we think about needing to change the balance, that's where we think about, things like reward placement and building up reinforcement for whichever of these things is weaker. So if our dogs are too handler focused, then we want to spend some time making sure that we throw their reward out in front of them, right? To encourage that forward focus, that your reward is going to magically appear after the obstacle, and to, at the same time that we're building that up, to take away some of the reinforcement from the handler. Mm-hmm. So, because every time we reward from our hand, every time we dig in our pockets for a treat to give our dogs, we're reinforcing that all good things come from me, come to me. And if we have too much of that, then we have to get rid of some of the hands in the pocket and increase some of the toy out on the line. But if we're having a problem where our dog is not reading a particular maneuver that we're doing that requires them to put their focus on us, like a front cross, right? Front cross is I guess one of the more basic maneuvers where you need some handler focus is probably the thing that beginners, if they're having trouble with their dog being too obstacle focused, they're going to find out when they try to do, a front cross, right? And their dog doesn't respond. And so then those are places where now it's a very good idea to reward from your body, to execute the front cross and have the reward in the hand next to the dog and to build up that focus that way.
That is very well said. And I think the next time you hear that your dog is either obstacle focused or too handler focused, I think just keep in mind, we want to get away from the label and we want to make this concept useful to you somehow. And hopefully we've done that by showing you that all of our dogs actually operate on a spectrum between these two extremes. And by keeping that in mind, you can tailor your training to your situation and really start to see some improvements in your handling.
That's right. And that these tendencies are very fluid. So if, as we said before, most dogs do start as being more handler focused. That doesn't mean that 5 years from now, you should be continuing to be concerned about your handler focused dog. They're probably at that point no longer a handler focused dog. So just know that it is very fluid, very changeable, and very specific to certain situations.
And that's it for this week's podcast.
We'd like to thank our sponsors, Back on Track and Elite Science, and also NTI Global. End of summer sale, your last chance to take advantage of these super savings. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com for the widest selection of dog agility tunnels for both competition and backyard training. Known for free shipping, more options, high quality products, and low prices, NTI Global has got you covered. They also offer tamer and anchor weight bags, along with a full line of accessories and agility storage solutions. Need your agility gear in a hurry? Don't forget to check the in-stock selection. Visit shop.ntiglobal.com and use promo code SUMSALE17 for 5% savings off today. That's SUMSALE17 for 5% savings off today. Promo code good through 8/31/2017. Happy training!
What does a scientist's dog do with bones? Bury 'em.